Story 1. Am I the a-hole for announcing that my dad's not paying my college tuition? My aunt and uncle are paying for my cousin's college. My dad had a college fund for me, but he had stipulations, like he wanted nothing below a B for grades and to pre-approve any classes I take, weekly meetings to discuss grades, and a bunch of other stuff. Which would be fine if you have a normal dad. Mine isn't. My dad has a temper, and I spent 6th through 12th grade stressed out about grades and being screamed at or grounded over things that sometimes weren't even my fault, like a teacher not updating online grading and an assignment being marked missing because of it, and getting my backpack and locker randomly searched by him for no reason besides to make sure I'm not hiding anything. I decided to pay for school myself because of 1, not being stressed over getting screamed at, 2, I didn't feel like constantly worrying that he'd disapprove of a class or a grade and decide not to pay, which I could totally see him doing. I'd rather be in debt than controlled for 4 more years. I just finished my first year. Well, my family got together on the 4th and, well, sometimes they're nosy. They were talking about my cousin's school, and my uncle looked at my dad and said, "Well, how much is my name school costing you?" I said, "What are you asking him for? I'm the one paying for it." Later on, my dad was peed off and said that it was out of line to say that, and I embarrassed him. I didn't do it to embarrass him. I was just being honest. He doesn't even know how much tuition is, so he was the wrong person to ask. Am I the a-hole? Holy crap, no you are not! Your dad is the a-hole. Your dad sounds like kind of a tremendous a-hole in some regards. Parents, you can't be so controlling of your kid like that and so demanding. I know that it usually does come from a place of like love and concern. You want your kid to succeed. You want to push them to be the best them, but you also can't be overbearing and controlling and stuff like that. Like that's just going to breed a bad relationship between the two of you, make the kid resentful, and sometimes they're going to rebel against you and do worse. So right off the bat, not a great start. But then for the dad to get mad that you decided, you know what, I don't want his money, I don't want to deal with that stuff, I'm going to pay my own way. And then you saying like, you're the one paying for it. Yeah, no, I'm sorry, your dad has no right to be embarrassed or upset about that stuff. Screw him, I'm sorry, your dad made his bed of you shutting him out of that part of your life, and now he gets to sleep in it, so screw him. Story 2. A stranger tells me, "Smile, it could be worse." Instantly regrets it. Last week I was out and about making a start on some errands I had. As I was walking, I was going through my long to-do list in my head, so I wasn't frowning, I wasn't smiling, my face was just in neutral. A man starts heading towards me. As we pass, he tells me, "Smile, it could be worse." I stop, stare at him for a moment, and then say, "My parents were in an accident. My mom died on impact. We're turning off my dad's life support tomorrow." The guy looked like a robot being suddenly shut down. His face fell. He looked like a deer in headlights. He stuttered and stammered. He was obviously trying to think of something to say, and when he couldn't, he turned around and speed walked away. My parents are both fine. There was no accident. But it annoys me when people think they have the right to dictate how people are feeling and what expressions they make, especially when they don't know what is going on in their lives. It's unhelpful and patronizing. Imagine telling somebody who's just been given a terminal diagnosis, "Smile, it could be worse," or somebody who's lost a child, been laid off, or is otherwise struggling in a terrible situation. I get where folks like this are coming from because, they want to spread joy in the world in, frankly, the laziest way possible, let's be honest. But still, in their mind, they're just trying to spread some positivity. They see someone that they think isn't happy and they're like, you know what? I'm going to remind them to be happy, which isn't really how things work. It's very simplistic, but I think oftentimes it's good intentioned, unless it's phrased as, you'd be prettier if you smile. I'm sorry, if you say that, then you're being just kind of sleazy and gross. Don't tell people that. Don't judge people's looks, especially, it's women who hear this all the time, for the most part. That one don't do. Some of this other stuff, yeah, you're trying to make people more positive, but like this person says, you don't know what they're going through. You don't know what they've just been through. And a lot of times, this lazy attempt at making the world a more positive place really does shine through more as just lazy and kind of ignorant. And so be careful when you just sling out unsolicited cheerfulness like that. It's not going to be welcome all the time. Story 3. My 35 female ex-husband's daughter announced she's getting married and wanted the family's heirloom ring? My ex-husband and I married too young. It was a classic white wedding with vows and the tradition of passing down a family ring. My ex was given his great-grandmother's wedding ring to give to me on our wedding day. We had a wonderful start, but we both really weren't ready to settle. He cheated on me and my drinking turned into alcoholism. We divorced, and the ring was never really discussed, so I've kept it all this time. We married at 19 and divorced by 22. Luckily, we didn't have kids. We went our separate ways. He found someone and remarried and had a girl, and boy, my journey has been harder. Alcoholism took many things from me, but I kept the old wedding ring. Never pawned, traded, or lost it, even during some really dark times. Even though my marriage ended, it was like a memory of a better time. I've gotten clean, and so far I'm on a long winning streak getting my life put back together. Through the gossip lines, I found out my ex is still married and his daughter, their oldest, just got engaged. I still have his great-grandmother's ring. He talked with me before we even married how he wanted to pass it down to his daughter one day. We haven't talked once after all these years. I don't know if he still wants his daughter to have this ring. Maybe he's forgotten about it. I feel conflicted about what to do. It wasn't a good ending. We were so young and stupid and mutually overly entitled. Should I get in touch or let sleeping dogs lie? Mail it as a wedding gift with a card anonymously or say it's from me? Edit. Thank you all for your kindness. I will definitely get in touch with him and let him decide where we go from there. Hopefully he'll want to meet face to face. It would be nice to see him after all this time. I'll keep his account up and will give an update if anything happens. Okay, at this point there is a brief recap of what we just read in the update. I had the ring professionally cleaned at a jeweler and given a pretty box to put in. While I was there, I took the advice of one commenter and ordered myself a ring. Instead of an inset diamond, I gave mine a ruby. It was my grandmother's name, and she never gave up on me, and it seemed fitting considering the other ring belonged to a great-grandmother. I decided to have maybe a cliche engraved of the word forward because that's how I've made it here to where I am now, by moving forward. My ex lives about 2 hours into town, and I had a girlfriend come with me. First, we drove by, and there weren't any cars, so we grabbed lunch and tried again. This time, someone was home, and I decided to leave things be. I had my friend go up to the door and knock. I saw him open the door. She handed him the package and pretty much headed straight back to the car. He didn't say much, she told me. Seemed a bit confused, but thanked her, and that was it. I didn't get to see if it made him happy or if he called his mother saying the ring found its way home. I imagine him beaming while explaining the ring to his wife as he passed it to his daughter. It is fun to imagine. I also imagine a lot of crying and hugging, but that's probably going too far. I had a note with it. I wrote almost exactly what a commenter suggested. It's been an honor and privilege to be a part of the history of this ring. Please accept it back with best wishes to your family and to your daughter's engagement. In a way, I kind of like not knowing how everyone reacted. I can daydream about it, my own fairy tale. I didn't include any way to contact me, just my name. I found him and feel if he wants to, he'll find me, but I don't see much point. Our time was short and it ended, and this is probably the best closure I never expected. It makes my heart lighter. Thank you all for helping and sharing this with me. This is actually a really touching story, and I'm really happy that the poster shared it with us because it also makes some great points. Like, that marriage sounds like it was not a healthy one at all. They got married too young, admittedly. They had troubles, and it barely lasted, 3 years or so. And, she struggled afterwards and everything, but she's put her life back together. And I think it was probably the healthy choice to not need to interact with him and see how things went, but to just realize that it was a part of her past. She can still respect him as a person. They've both moved on. And I think that brings a really kind of beautiful sense of closure to give that symbol of their marriage back, but getting your own one, kind of remembering where you came from and what you've been through, because you shouldn't hang on to stuff in the past that went wrong necessarily, but it is healthy to be able to at least remember it. And I don't know, this feels like kind of a really beautiful metaphor for that whole concept. So cool. Story 4, how I gutted my HOA. Oh. This is the story of how I completely changed out my community's HOA board and foreclosed on one of their houses after they disrespected me. Too long didn't read. I got fined for ridiculous things by my HOA and got ticked off and decided to get on the board. I then spent a year removing all members of the board I joined and replacing them with people that were pro-small HOA. I have since helped reduce policies and tried to make the community better for everyone. Backstory. A few years ago, I bought my first house in a medium-sized 500 to 1,000 homes neighborhood in a southern state. It had an HOA, Homeowners Association. But I actually picked the neighborhood because they had the lowest HOA dues in the city, the fewest rules, and the house was by far the nicest one I could afford in my budget. After a few weeks, I get a violation notice from the HOA telling me that I had 2 violations needing correction. 1, my lawn was not green enough. 2, my trash cans were too close to my driveway. I was thoroughly confused about number 1, as it was February in the middle of winter, so of course my lawn was dead, like pretty much everyone else's. So I had assumed that either this was a mistake or an existing offense from the previous owner. As for the trash cans, I kept them on the side of my house, and I think where the HOA came by, my trash cans stuck out past the sidewall about 1 foot, so how dare I? I shrugged them off and continued on. Come March, I got another notice, this time fining me for both violations. Each one cost me $100, and they wanted the money in 2 weeks. I was peed. This has made no sense, and I was not about to let them just try to get money for BS violations. So I called the management company that worked with the board to get them appealed. The lady told me that I needed to appeal directly to the board and that I could do so in the next annual meeting in a few days. So, of course, I showed up to the meeting. Prior to it starting, I met with a few homeowners and learned that they were all there for similar BS violations, and we're peed off too. I then talked with one of the members of the board about the fine appeals process. He was an older guy in his 70s with short gray hair and a very worn and angry face. He asked what I was getting fined for, and when I told him, he just looked at me and said, "And you should get fined for that. Young people like you not taking care of their homes is the whole reason I got on this board. Learn to be a better property owner." This dude was the VP of a volunteer board telling me that I did not know how to take care of my house. What a sad life. The meeting then started, and the moderator mentioned that since this was an annual meeting, we would be voting on 3 out of 5 board members. They had some applicants on the board, and we could also nominate someone today. That's when I had the idea of how I could get my revenge. When the election part of the meeting came, I nominated myself, gave some BS speech about HOAs are not here to make money and that I wanted to serve my community. I won in a landslide, and you could see the board members getting annoyed because they had scowled during my speech. After the meeting, I appealed my violations in a very elegant way, and they agreed to waive my trash can violation. As for the grass one, apparently since I had weeds growing in my yard, like tiny patch in the corner, they were still fining me because the weeds were turning yellow after I sprayed them. I was dumbfounded how they could get away with this, but they used a technicality in the bylaws that I had signed, so I ended up losing $100. Revenge. I will be honest, I had not expected this to work. After joining the board of 5, including myself, I was appointed secretary and had to help maintain meeting notes and review records. They specifically told me that I was not allowed to propose new policies, but I could vote on new ones proposed by the VP or president, which I later learned was actually a violation of their own rules. I voted every new rule down as long as I was in that position. I decided that my best course of action was to listen to how the others operated excited and looked for an opening to get each of them off the board. The first opening came when the president, who literally looked like the most Karen woman ever, mentioned that she had wanted to find flowers that were not neutral color. Basically, if a homeowner wanted to add something like turquoise flowers, we would find them. She apparently had a neighbor that had flowers that she didn't like, and she wanted to use the board to stop them. It was pretty insane. I then started my revenge on her. I started a message thread on Slack, since that's how we communicated, with the other board members and asked what they had thought about her policy and reasoning. After far too much deliberation, 2 of them honestly thought this was okay, we agreed that the policy went too far. I then made a long post in the main channel telling her that her actions were not only wrong, but that she should be excused from the board. When she inevitably flipped out, I called a board meeting the following week, and the other 4 board members boarded her off for targeting a community member for personal gain. She gave a sob story about how the board was her life and that the neighborhood was like her child, but I didn't care. That was one down. I convinced one of my good neighbor friends to join a little later on to take her spot. The next member I targeted were the treasurer and director. I wanted to save the VP for last. They were actually pretty easy to get off the board because they were very easily swayed by public opinion. So I made a fake account on Nextdoor and waited until spring when most of the violations go out. When the letters went out, I looked for angry posts on Nextdoor. I then would comment on each one, giving them the first names of the 2 board members as the culprits and told them to come to the next HOA meeting to appeal. It worked far better than I'd expected. During the next meeting, over 50 people showed up and called out those by name. It was glorious. During the opening session, community members grilled those 2 for their poor policies, even though they did not make most of them. The VP, now president after the other one resigned, tried to defend them, but ultimately failed. The 2 members were so distraught after the meeting, and I told them that they maybe should resign, and they both did. That was 2 more down, both of which were replaced by a couple who came to the same meeting and wanted to get rid of these rules. Finally, the board had been flipped to 4 out of 5 people wanting to get rid of all these dumb rules. The president, however, was still the same old, angry, hateful man. He tried to add more rules to increase violation revenue, and we voted him down every time. He started to get annoyed, but stayed steadfast to the board. I tried a lot of tactics to get him to leave, and not much swayed him. A few months went by and we started with a new management company. They had a much better style of property management and a website for looking through our community's record as well as automated reports. When we got our first fine report, I hit pay dirt. The president's house appeared and he owed around $10,000. Apparently he had open violations that he had never paid, and the other management company hid it from the board for him since he had been on the board for close to 7 years. So I looked into remedies. Since his fines were over $3,000, our bylaws stated that a majority vote of the board could start an HOA foreclosure on the home, which I think is insane that HOAs can do that. So I got all the docs together and double-checked with the new management company that the fines were correct, which they confirmed. I called an emergency board session, presented the information, and 4 out of 5 of us started the foreclosure process. The president got angry, cursed, and left the meeting early. We were informed a few days later that the president had resigned, paid his fine, and put his house up for sale. While I am sad we couldn't force a foreclosure, at least he was off the board. I am currently president to this day, and I have reduced the fining policy to be a maximum of $400, and homeowners can appeal any time that they wish digitally. In addition, I have banned any grass fines until May, and trash can violations have been super relaxed. Moral of the story? Never fine me $200, call me a stupid young kid, and expect to not lose your house. So this is where I get to say that homeowners associations typically suck. They suck so hard, and they make me so mad. And thankfully, I am not part of a homeowners association. My partner and I, we live in a house. There's no HOA, and if ever there is, I am going to move deep into the countryside, away from society, because as lovely as an idea as it might seem to be like, oh, a neighborhood that kind of self-governs and keeps things nice, they are so prone to corruption, so wildly prone to corruption. And It's just miserable. I've known a number of people who have had HOAs, and none of them have ever been happy. It is like when you buy your own house, part of the joy, the freedom, is not having a landlord or a management company making your life miserable. That's what a homeowners association is for homeowners, and it's awful. So, folks, if you're getting to the point where you're starting to look for a house, I would say if you can find a place without an HOA, go for that. And if you have to get one, do your research on it. Oh my God, do your research on an HOA before you buy a house, because the things that they can do to make your life miserable are absurd. Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.